Welcome to the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. I'm Adam Lang. We love our sport in Australia, but the way we watch it is changing. It all used to be pretty simple, particularly when it came to free-to-air television. Channel 9 had the cricket and the NRL, 7 had the tennis and the AFL, 10 had motorsport, and the ABC had much of the rest. But now it's far from simple. 9's got the tennis, 7 is the new home of the cricket, and Fox Sports has become a bigger player than ever before. Then add in streaming services like Stan, Optus Sport and Kayo, and it's even more interesting. But in the US, tech giant Amazon has now made a play for NFL rights. It begs the question, could Australia be next in a new wave of broadcast deals with some seriously cashed up buyers? Ben Willee is the General Manager and Media Director of Spinach Advertising Agency. Ben, welcome back to Fear and Greed.
G'day Adam, thanks very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. How much did Amazon pay in the US for Thursday night football?
Amazon paid about $1 billion, we think. We don't know for sure, but about $1 billion only for the Thursday night football, which is a small part of the overall deal that was announced recently for 11 years, a total deal with all their broadcast partners for a measly $110 billion for those 11 years. And about doubling of what the NFL had received for the previous deal.
Those are staggering numbers. Now, the population numbers in Australia are much smaller, but do you think we could see something similar happen here?
Oh, look, absolutely, without a doubt. And it's a bit like the cashed up bogans with their new money moving into the posh suburbs. We're inevitably going to see that in Australia, and the broadcasters and their traditional business models are going to find it very difficult because there are people who have a business model where they get paid by the user, not paid by the advertiser, and they have a lot more money and they have a lot more longer term thinking. So a bit like an auction for a house in some of the posher suburbs of Sydney and Melbourne or Brisbane or Adelaide, the more bidders you have for the rights, the more likely you are to get a higher price. And broadcast rights holders in Australia are absolutely salivating at the thought of, being able to increase what are absolutely extraordinary numbers already by breaking them up and having new bidders come to that auction, new bidders with really fat wallets looking to change the rules.
It's a fascinating dynamic. Let's get a bit of an understanding of the main players. Who are the biggest streaming services in Australia based on the subscriber numbers?
Very good point. We're pretty sure that Netflix is obviously the largest. And according to Roy Morgan Research, Netflix has about 13.2 million local subscribers. And Amazon Prime, who we were talking about a minute ago, according to Roy Morgan, has only got about 2.1 million. And then you've got people like Kayo saying they've got over 600,000. So there's a big varying number in these subscribers. There's a varying number in what consumers are paying for. But I think what's really interesting here is that during coronavirus, I think most people staying home were happy to have more subscription services. But what we're seeing is that people have reached the limit of paying for subscription service. And if you believe the people at Gemba, they're saying that 72% of customers have reached their limit on sport and entertainment platforms. So realistically, there's got to be some consolidation, not just in Australia, but globally. We can't see this many platforms and we can't see the growth in providers. We've got Network 10's global affiliate coming to the market soon. So really, it's a big and complicated space and there has to be some consolidation, not just because there are fewer consumers prepared to pay for these services, but also because the numbers that these services are paying for content is just absolutely staggering. And I'll give you a perfect example is I know these streaming services love to talk about how all their viewers are watching all the new cool shows like The Crown. But if you listen to the research in the US, some of the most watched programs on streaming services are really old programs. And a perfect example of that is the US version of The Office or Friends. And we saw the rights for Friends change from Netflix last year for $426 million in the US. And why that's fascinating, this is a show that hasn't been on television for over 15 years. The owners of the show and the producers have probably spent about $1 billion over its life. They've probably reaped about a 20% return. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, someone gives you a check for 40% of the cost of your program 14 years after you've stopped making it. I mean, it's really, really staggering. And at some point, these numbers have to wind back. And at some point, common sense has got to prevail in stock markets, and people have got to say, these companies have got to stop making a land grab for content and subscribers and start making money like we expect companies to do.
It is really such a dynamic field. You've got the free-to-air broadcasters with moving beyond analog to digital rights and multi-channeling. They can now play more sport than they used to. They don't just have to choose one output per station. You've then got the streamers, as you say, Netflix, Amazon Prime, Stan, Kayo in the mix, all competing for this land grab, as you describe it. Some of these shows will make money, some of them won't, but so much of it is that consolidation question of who will survive, and that can lead people to overpay. So let's bring it back to sport. What are each of those new players, the Amazon, Netflix, Stan, Kayo, what are they already doing in terms of sport in Australia?
Well, I mean, obviously, Kayo, it's a great question. And obviously, Kayo is an offshoot of Foxtel. And what they've very cleverly done is they've said, okay, well, our business is changing, so we better have a streaming app. And they've been able to, take over the rights in a digital environment for a lot of the sports that they've had. And they've already got the infrastructure in place to make that happen. So that's very clever. I think what's really been most interesting to the ad market is what the Nine Entertainment Group have done. I mean, they're the owners of not just the Nine TV channels, but they also own Stan. And they've recently done a deal for some tennis out of Roland Garros and Wimbledon, and they've done some deals for some rugby. So what they're able to do is spread the cost of those events across two platforms. So they're able to spread it across the cost of a television program and also allocate some of it to their Stan platform. Now, what's really, really important to TV stations, streaming services, is we forget that they're their own biggest client. So if you've got a massive hit on your platform and that program generates much more viewership, which is exactly what they want. If you look at the last 12 months in Australia, about 7 of the top 10 programs have been sport related. So sport is a really fantastic vehicle for owners of broadcast rights to promote their other content and to keep that flywheel spinning. So what I think that we'll see here is that, and what's happened in the past with TV stations is they've just said, hey, we're never going to recoup the amount of money we've spent. Take AFL, Seven's never going to recoup the $760 million they paid over 5 years in advertising revenue. It's just not there. But as their own biggest client, that's a great vehicle for them to promote Dancing with the Stars, News, some of their other programs. And that's what is driving a lot of the thinking is in this space. And that's what's driving that land grab is if we own the eyeballs, we can monetize the eyeballs. And it doesn't matter if we monetize them now, we monetize them at a later date.
Stay with me, Ben. We'll be back in a minute. My guest this morning is Ben Willee, General Manager and Media Director of Spinach Advertising Agency. There's also the other spin-off programs that come from sport too, such as The Front Bar, which has been probably in recent years a runaway success in terms of peripheral programming they can get access to.
Oh, and what a great success story that is. I mean, it's just a few people sitting in a bar, having a beer, having a chat about sport and mostly footy. And quite a cheap program to produce, a really great ratings winner and really strong engagement. Advertisers love it and the networks love it. So, I think you're absolutely right. And, Amazon have dipped their toe in the water by running that series called The Test, following the Australian cricket team.
Which is an incredible documentary, I think.
Oh, it's a great documentary, not just about sport, but about leadership and, how to carry yourself and focusing on the brilliant basics. The family and I loved it, and I've got family members who don't even like sport that much. So I think you're absolutely right. The peripherals around sport are, really high engagement, and if they're done well, they create eyeballs, and we all know that eyeballs create money.
So what about the other tech giants? We've not mentioned yet Facebook and Google and company. Is there an appetite to get involved from them in sporting rights that you're seeing, Ben?
Look, we haven't seen so much of it yet, but I expect we will. I mean, let's separate Facebook and Google just for a moment. Facebook really recognise that they need more video content on their platform because they can charge advertisers more for video ad units. And advertisers like video ad units because they have sight, sound and movement. So Facebook have tried a number of ways and they're still working with a lot of broadcasters to try and get more video content on their platform. A, to keep you on the platform longer, but B, to be able to serve you what we would call dynamic ads with movement rather than just static ads. And I would argue that Facebook have a lot of work to do in this space. I think they've probably got more regulatory issues around the world they've got to focus on. Whereas if you compare them to Google, Google is the owner of YouTube, and YouTube is already an enormous space for sport and sport content, just not so much live sport. And you've got a lot of younger people and niche sports generating content on YouTube, which is driving a lot of money, and especially esports as well. And that's a sector that is just absolutely booming globally. I only have to look at my kids and see how much they watch other people playing video games, which baffles me completely, but it absolutely floats their boat. So what I think we'll see is YouTube is a bit more advanced in that space and certainly probably freer. And there are rumours that YouTube execs have already visited Australia pre-coronavirus and had a lot of talks with broadcast rights holders. And I would expect they would use Australia as a developed market and, a new market to test some of those rights to then take out globally. So watch this space.
Another space that I've become aware of through my kids too is Twitch and the fascination that many have with watching others play esports via television, in inverted commas. Twitch is a phenomenon that's entering this space too in an almost parallel universe.
It is a parallel universe, and if you didn't know about it, you wouldn't know that it existed and how much money is being generated out of that.
Another one to keep watch on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've been involved in negotiating broadcast rights for multiple codes and different broadcasters. Ben, you've negotiated plenty of broadcast rights in sport for clients. We've both seen, I think, how complicated they can be. As more players become involved with more sets of sports rights, do you think the price of sports rights in Australia can continue to go up?
Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt. I think sports rights will continue to go up while there are more people bidding for them and more people interested. And there's a part of this discussion we probably haven't touched on, and that's the data and ownership of the eyeball. If you register on my platform to watch footy, I can collect a hell of a lot of data about you as an individual. I can say, all right, you're a massive fan of the Bombers or the Manly Sea Eagles or whoever it is. You watch every week. And then I can embed other tracking devices on your computer, on your devices, and I can really get a feel for you as a person. I can say, well, this person lives in a posh area, they watch a lot of footy, and I can sell that data to advertisers and marketers and sponsorship partners and back to the clubs themselves and use that information to make money. And that's a big part of what's happening here with some of the television networks in Australia. They're really keen to get you on the 7pluses and the 9Now platforms because then they can collect data about you and use that data and build a complete picture about you as a person and use that to market to you better. Now, some people might say, well, that's creepy as hell, the way they follow me around, and I don't like that. And other people might say, well, that's pretty good because I'm much more interested in getting an ad for a fantastic pair of running shoes that really appeal to me than I am for getting an ad for something that doesn't appeal to me at all. So the data play will drive a lot of the price in this space. And yeah, I think we'll absolutely see it going up as more people want to collect that data about you.
It's incredible, isn't it? While the GDPR, the General Data Protection Requirement, is complied with, and then data is anonymised when it comes to people, there is still an incredibly large amount of information you can get while still complying with those requirements.
Yeah, we leave digital breadcrumbs all over the internet and all over our devices. And if you don't want to be tracked at all, you've got to work twice as hard than if you're just going to accept that this is something that happens in the modern world. And, there are parts of it that are bad and there are parts of it that are good, and that, it's really incumbent on legislators around the world to keep on top of what's going on in this space. So this data can't be used for evil, and it can't be used to manipulate us in a way that's wrong.
We'll be back with more in a moment. I'm talking to Ben Willee, General Manager and Media Director of Spinach Advertising Agency. Moving back into the rights area, how important do you think anti-siphoning laws will be in any of these discussions?
It's a really great question. I'm really perplexed by anti-siphoning legislation because, as I understand it, and I'm not a lawyer, as I understand it, the networks in Australia just have to have the right to put these programs listed on the anti-siphoning legislation to air. And we might just spend a minute talking about that. The anti-siphoning legislation came into Australia in the 90s, and what it was designed to do was to protect certain events that Australians felt should be on free-to-air and they shouldn't have to pay for on free-to-air. So if you didn't have Foxtel or you didn't have pay TV, you could still watch those events. And that was based on the experience that was happening in the US and the UK at the time. And that experience was that, really, really good quality sport people had to pay for, and they didn't want that in Australia. So the legislation stipulates a whole bunch of events like, one-day cricket, test cricket, AFL grand finals, NRL grand finals, Rugby World Cups, that sort of things, that these events have to be available on free-to-air. What we've seen more recently, and we've seen it with the cricket deal with Channel 7 that Cricket Australia did, is that one-day cricket, which exists on the anti-siphoning legislation, is now behind the paywall on Foxtel. And that's just because, as part of the deal, 7 had the right to broadcast it, and they said they would give that up. And I think we didn't see too much controversy about that. So you could certainly argue that Joe Public doesn't care that much about the anti-siphoning legislation, because if they did, there would have been uproar, because what is supposedly a jewel in the cricket crown, i.e. one-day international cricket, is now behind a paywall.
A very interesting one to watch. Before I let you go, Ben, it's been an incredible 12 to 15 months. The economy, fortunately at the moment, seems to be recovering faster than many expected. How are you seeing it play out in terms of the advertising market at the moment?
Oh, look, we're delighted by what's happening in the ad market. It's been a white-knuckle ride, a roller coaster in the last 12 months. But in the depth, year on year, we had the market back 39% in May last year. And, we've had pretty much flat markets since October 2019 all the way through. The March numbers just came out, and March 2021 is up 2%. And we're going to be circling some pretty horrible numbers come April. And what we're seeing is that demand for media spacing, television, billboards, et cetera, has absolutely skyrocketed. And the month of April, whilst the numbers aren't out yet, the month of April is going to see some pretty significant growth, probably plus 10%. And we expect that the ad market to grow year on year by probably between 10 and 15% for the next 3 or 4 months. And, that's a function of consumer confidence and confidence in the economy and in the market. And it's really great for our business. We're delighted because it was, terrible times this time last year. We were looking off a cliff.
Ben, thank you very much for joining us on Fear and Greed again this morning.
Thanks very much for having me, Adam.
That was Ben Willee, General Manager and Media Director of Spinach Advertising Agency. This is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Join Sean Aylmer every weekday morning for the full Fear and Greed podcast with all the business news you need to know. I'm Adam Lang. Enjoy your day.